Shy. Obviously, long quantum, Martin, short on it. I personally have no horse in this race, unless there's something in my passive index funds probably reflected. I hear both sides of the argument, so I'll be sort of playing moderator here. Martin, let's start with you. Bearish on IonQ, D Wave, people we talk about have on the show often. Uh, Briefly, just explain why you said before the show you think it's a scam. Why is that?
Yeah, so quantum computing is something that I think nobody really actually understands. It's something that sounds like a cool fantasy, but in reality, it's a very different thing from what it sounds like. So what it actually is, it's a very, very finite group of computing algorithms you can run for very specific problems. I would say less than 1% of all compute problems are addressable by quantum computing. And in fact, I would say will ever be addressable by quantum computing. So quantum computing is not the next NVIDIA. It's really not even something exciting at all. And in fact, we have a really long way before it'll actually work at all. I'm not sure quantum computing will ever really work, to be honest, for anything commercially relevant. I've talked to people at Google, IBM, people who have worked at some of the smaller quantum computing companies, the leading quantum theorists in the world. Um, it's just not going to happen. And I think that the excitement about something futuristic is admirable, but reality is something that does set in. I've been involved in biotech my whole life, and CRISPR is an example of a futuristic technology. You can buy the best CRISPR stocks at cash value right now because reality did set in. And reality set in that, we actually have to make drugs with this stuff. It can't just be front page stories and fantasy. Eventually a year goes by and people say, well, where's the drugs? And it didn't happen with CRISPR. Same thing's going to happen to quantum. All of these stocks will drop 95%.
Quick follow up, and then I'm going to get Shy's counterpoint. We had the CEO of D Wave come on recently, and he was saying they have commercially viable products they're selling or solutions. I know they have a professional services layer in addition to the tech. What do you say to companies like that are saying there
Sure.
is commercial viability?
So I'd say get a criminal lawyer. I went to jail for 7 years. I think that there's probably a good criminal lawyer in your area that you can consult with.
Okay, Shy. You're obviously on the other side of this, and we've talked before. Like you kind of believe there's broad applications of this, taking the other side. What's your viewpoint on all this?
I love that he's sticking his neck out for sure. This is the whole thing about what we do, why we do the show. We could be wrong, we could be right, but we're trying to provide angles to make everyone who's listening more curious and think a certain way, different way than what you're accustomed to. So clearly, I do believe that quantum computing is the next frontier after AI, and I disagree with the notion that it's a dud or it's not going to be ever hitting that frontier after AI. I think it's like a similar mentality where like even in the early internet days, like internet was dismissed in early days in like the mid 90s because nobody was able to monetize a web page, for example. That has clearly changed. Just look at e-commerce, or even GPUs were kind of dismissed like a decade or so ago because nobody can imagine a consumer needing that kind of scale compute on their devices. So I do think the question that matters right now is a little different than they're duds, because today's reality, people might have a difficult time actually understanding why we need quantum computing, because it's not really hitting that wall today. But I do think eventually, I think a lot of people I talked in the space, especially at Future Equities in the past couple of days, like classical compute is already hitting walls today, and it's going to continue to accelerate, especially when you see all these AI data centers just starting to get funded, not just domestically, internationally, across the Atlantic Ocean. Sovereigns are starting to adopt it drastically. Billions of dollars will be spent on data centers for AI that eventually is going to hit a classical compute wall. So when it does, there has to be newer solutions. And I do think that you mentioned D-Wave. So I think I'm very specific where I do think a lot of the quantum computing names out there are duds. I really do believe like D-Wave, it's such a niche architecture that serves
You're talking about the
important to the
annealing.
yeah, the annealing. Like I think it's very limited use cases. They're capitalizing on something super small today, but it's never going to be scalable. It's never going to be any kind of architecture. I think they lack a clear path to a broader market capture. I think that's like, okay, you're winning this little jump, but you're not going to be a real player in this space. And I think where Getty is also playing a uphill battle against Google's and IBM's, where they're pursuing a superconducting qubit that's kind of the same basic architecture, like those monster names I just called out on Google and IBM, and they won't have the R&D depth or scale of those giants, and I think they're just kind of going to phase out as well. So I think IonQ is playing a completely different architecture game, like building that quantum internet stack. But I'm gonna stop there. But like that's
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man? Bro, I'm out, man. That nigga's tripping.
kind of where I see the bear arguments. I see Martin's argument why he would think that way. I just think it's more of I have a thesis, I have a story. It's going to turn into something, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Martin, I gotta ask you, like I heard you're bearish obviously on some of the smaller names we talked about. What about like Google? You don't even think Google's quantum is legit?
Yeah, so I can't say, I want to be circumspect about how I got this information, just because it reveal identities of people close to the Google circle. But Google is not bullish on quantum. Google's head of quantum has said that the most revenue they ever expect from quantum is $100 million. My question for Shai is, how exactly do you think quantum can help next generation computing?
Well, I mean, we can also stick with like just biotech today, for example. I think biotech, that would be a great conversation.
No, I'm talking about quantum.
That's what I'm saying. I think quantum, like biotech, is heavily targeting quantum right now.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah?
They're signing 7 or 8 figure deals already right now with IonQ specifically.
I don't know if you know this, but I'm the pharma bro. I know you are. I started billion-dollar drug companies. Drugs and quantum have nothing to do with each other.
Look at the
But
storyline.
Martin,
Keith,
I gotta.
They have nothing to do with each other.
No, there's a storyline today about 20 times the speed up in drug discovery simulations.
You believe that
IonQ.
shit? You believe that bullshit?
Why, Martin? Why don't you? I guess why don't you believe it? I guess because I have no horse in this race. But like in preparation, there a lot of experts do believe there are
the plaque on my wall in the corner there is chemistry patents that I've won for my chemistry. No experts believe this. None.
Zero. Not one. None. You can't find one.
None.
I mean, that's just not true.
If you talk, no, it is true. Talk to anybody in pharma. Do you know anyone in pharma? Talk to Pfizer, Merck, J&J, Roche chemist. Ask them if they need quantum computing.
AstraZeneca does.
No, they don't. I know the CEO of AstraZeneca. They don't need quantum computing. They don't want a quantum computing. So they do these deals. Shai, you're confused. You're being tricked by a bunch of fraudsters. And again, I went to prison for fraud. And I'm telling you,
they're wasting $100 million just on just bullshit.
No pharma company spending $100 million.
So I guess, Martin, what's the pro side if they're not actually serious about it? The Googles, the pharma companies. Why put on the facade that this is a thing?
It's not a facade. I mean, people are working hard. I think that each company has a different angle. Google they want to be Bell Labs. Bell Labs was, a division of AT&T that was basically, let's do research for research's sake. What comes of it, we may monetize, we may not, but we're going to do cool research. They invented C. They invented the transistor. AT&T never made $1 from any of that stuff. It was the coolest science in the world. Google does the same thing. If you ever talk to people at Google who do Google X or Google Moonshots or whatever, they're just doing stuff to do stuff. It's not because they think it's a big business.
But they think it could be, right? Because
not really.
I think it's a different lens the way that Google's playing out, because I don't think Google is trying to incentivize to make quantum computing widely available ever. I think they want proprietary edge into their own stack.
There's nothing you can do with quantum computing. Don't you understand this? What is the thing? I'm asking you over and over again. What is the thing that you can do with quantum that you can't do with NVIDIA chips?
Well, they're going to hit a constraint issue, just like in energy. Like,
how will quantum help that?
So based on what I've read, Martin, is that the case for that is that they believe quantum will reduce the energy needs of some of this AI compute, and therefore it's an efficiency thing. Now, I'm not deep in the technicality of that, but that is what I've heard from people on the other side.
Technical space. So when I get into technical spaces, I try to get deep into the technicality because I want to know if I'm being scammed or not.
Yeah.
And one of the things about quantum computers that isn't really well understood is they take minutes to calibrate.
You have to write a brand new circuit and compile a circuit to run a quantum computation. It's not a general purpose computer. You have to build a circuit each time. The circuit speed is in the order of hertz per second, not megahertz, not gigahertz, but literal hertz per second. So you set up a compute and you run the compute. I do this. I'm actually a big customer of these cloud quantum computing companies because I try before I buy. You know, some people will go buy an Abercrombie shirt before they buy Abercrombie stock. I actually run quantum programs. Me and my girlfriend, who's a quantum expert, we run these quantum programs on these computers. They don't do anything right now, and it looks like they will never do anything. So if you actually want to try it, most people know how to program Python.
Well, when you say it looks like they're not going to do anything, can you get more specific on why
Sure.
that is?
Yeah. So quantum speed up only applies to Shor's algorithm, as far as we know. Shor's algorithm is a great algorithm for factoring primes. That is not a business. Unless you like dividing big numbers for your spare time, that is not something any company needs. There is no quantum algorithm that actually provides a speed up for things that classical can't do. That's why every time D-Wave puts out a bullshit thing, or even now IonQ trying to put out these bullshit things, they get refuted immediately. Because the real computer people know that this is nonsense.
So, Martin, I got to ask just like stages of innovation, right? Because it's the same thing with biotech. Like things start as an idea on paper, they're developed, they have failed, they put out stuff that doesn't work, they go back to the lab. Why don't you think quantum is on that longer term development cycle?
Sure.
And you think it could never possibly get to a stage?
Sure. So the compute gates, the and or gates that actually function as the building blocks of a computer for quantum, they have around 99.9% gate fidelity. And so if you try to do more than 1,000 or 5,000 gates, the program doesn't work at all because the errors add up and they just don't work. We've added 1.9 to that every 5 years. So at this pace, quantum may be ready to run Shor's algorithm, not general purpose computer. You can't use AI with this. That's just not serious. Like that's not somebody that's even done a tiny amount of work in this space. Shor's may be runnable in 30 years. Shor's is something for hackers like me, cryptography people who want to break things, criminals, and maybe NSA. But even Chris Monroe, the founder of IonQ, said we're 30 years away. The founder of IonQ, not the new guy not the new promotional guy that's taken over, that's willing to give his stock away every other day in printing stock like it's going out of style for acquisitions.
What are you hacking, Martin?
Bitcoin.
What does that mean to hack Bitcoin?
Bitcoin is
You're
vulnerable.
stealing Bitcoin?
Bitcoin's vulnerable to quantum computing.
Right.
I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
I've actually been very curious.
It is
about
the
that.
one thing you can actually use quantum for, Shai, which is something it doesn't look like it's
We're
really
always going to disagree on that
cryptography.
because of the AI. I think we're
No,
just going to be in
there's-
a vicious flywheel on that. But I'm curious on the crypto one because I
There's
get that all
nothing
the
else
time.
you can use quantum for. It is just a provable fact. Like the fantasies of these companies are fun to listen to, but the reality is they're lying. They're talking about these things like they're happening tomorrow. IonQ has no clue how to get to the roadmap they just published with millions of qubits by 2030. Nobody knows how to do that.
I mean, Jensen's hyper bullish on quantum.
No, he's not.
He's
He's
setting
not.
up internally. He's setting up teams to capture CUDA Q.
No, you're lying again. So my wife, the woman I'm having a child with, she is her father was a senior guy at NVIDIA. We talk to NVIDIA people all the time. They laugh at quantum every day. Jensen said it was 30 years away. CUDA Q is 0.001%. They do CUDA everything because that's their job. They're not bullish on quantum. If they were bullish on quantum, they would spend $50 billion and build quantum computers. That's not what they're doing.
I disagree.
They're
The
laughing at
reason they're playing it very delicately because the more quantum spotlight, it's less about AI, and they're making.
What a crazy conspiracy. No, the quantum computing industry is a zero right now. The AI industry is $200 billion industry. You think Jensen is afraid of quantum?
So, Martin, you said something that I kind of want to get to because you said
the elephant is afraid of an ant? Come on.
you said 30 years from now. So
Yes.
is it which is it? Is it it's never going to happen, or it's just not on the
I
timeline
think
people say it's on?
I think Shor's will happen. Quantum computing being useful as a computer for anyone other than a cryptographer seems like it'll never happen. Like
Okay,
not
but
50, not even 100 years from now, because the
it's in
technical
the realm of possibility that somebody building against the Shor's algorithm in 30 years could have a viable business, a booming business.
you know, that doesn't sound like a great bull thesis to me.
I'm not making a bull thesis. I'm basically saying
I'm making a bear thesis. So
Yeah.
that sounds awful. I'd love to short that stock. The could be true in 30 years. Sounds not so good.
But
It
I guess
sounds like that's
I
for, like,
want to go
3D
back to
printing.
the biotech though, because it's so interesting to me. Because in biotech, and again, I'm not deep in these spaces like you are, but at a surface level, just looking at it, feels similar. There's
Yes,
moonshot projects that get
biotech was
funded
one of
that
the worst-
fail. So, like, I
Biotech
guess
is one of the worst investment classes of all time. Most of the
Biotech
pioneers
is.
of biotech failed.
yeah. I mean, I want to get off the quantum thing, but I want to ask you about biotech because I think a lot of people
Why
are
get off the
interested.
quantum thing?
What?
Why get off the quantum thing?
It's
Because I have a question about biotech. We'll go back to it. Let's
Ah,
stay on quantum.
you're technically outmatched. You don't know anything about this space, but you
Dude,
bullshit
you
all
are
day.
you are just throwing like just ridiculous claims with
No,
no substance expert.
tell
Trust
me
me, bro.
what algorithm-
Guys,
You're doing
tell
trust me,
me-
bro energy the whole time.
I'm giving you the floor. Tell me
No,
what
no, it
algorithm.
doesn't matter what I can say.
Stop
I can
for a
say the
second.
sky is blue, and you're
Tell
not
me-
going to
no,
believe it
I
because you're
want
going to say
you-
something about you heard in the
I
back
want you
of
to
some dark
explain-
room.
I want you to explain what algorithm can you run on these quantum computers that is useful.
Today, it's
Any
very
day,
elementary.
Any day.
You don't understand the future constraint issues you're going to have. You're talking about Shor's algorithm. Fine. You can't just break the RSA encryption tomorrow. I agree with that. Like, today's landscape isn't going to be capturing quantum computers' potential right now. That's not the point of this conversation. I'm saying 90%
Right.
of the quantum stocks out there are probably duds. I agree with that.
Four.
IonQ's not a hardware company. I think the hardware component of quantum is a dud. I don't think that's going to be anything. But I do think quantum is absolutely the next frontier. You can say you talk to someone at
For
NVIDIA,
what, though?
fine.
For what? I'm asking
For the-
you to be
All
specific.
right, fine. For the grid, the energy constraint issues, the only
What
way
compute is it going to do?
you can't just keep throwing GPUs and CPUs at the problem, and eventually it's going to hit a.
Are you suggesting that these computers can replace GPUs?
They're going to add an additional layer where the more complex issues that GPUs
Such
just can't
as?
hit. I don't know. You just drug discovery is one. There's going to be a lot more of.
But how does it perform the program? So I'm a computer programmer. I'm trying to figure out if you're writing a program for a quantum computer, how is it faster than a classical computer? If there's not a complexity speed up, you have to go from, say, Shor's lets you go to a very fast complexity class. Grover's allows you to go from big O of n to square root of n.
Okay.
What
do you know
algorithm are
about?
you
Do you know
talking
about the Monte Carlo simulation?
Of course I do.
Okay, so that can't scale. So what? How are you supposed to
What do you mean
attack
can't
that
scale?
problem?
Quantum's there's no proof that quantum can do that any faster than classical. And
I think
remember,
there's some research studies on that. I think because compute requirements can't explode exponentially with system size on that.
Quantum Monte Carlo if you publish a proof that quantum Monte Carlo is faster than classical Monte Carlo, you'll win a Turing Prize. There is no proof of that.
Well, no, I think that's why a lot of the major pharma firms are they're sending commercial checks to IonQ right now because they're trying to solve for that right now. Like, it's not
where's the
trying to
revenue
say that
showing
better.
up? Last quarter, IonQ didn't have much revenue.
It's backlog revenue. It's backlog.
Wait,
It's stuff that isn't really reflected right now. But that's usually the case for early disruptors and secular growth themes. That's always going to be through pipelines or backlogs.
So I get the sense that you don't understand computer programming. The bandwidth that goes into these machines and out of these machines is like it would take you a day to put just a GIF of this conversation, a screenshot into one of these machines. You understand? You cannot feed the internet into it, have it zap a bunch of ions, and it comes out a great calculation. That's not how these machines work. Like they're laser precision machines that take days to fix up. They don't just take information like a fire hose and then push it back out. They do one-off calculations of very high complexity combinatorial problems, but they only do those if they're very specific. And the only problem that we found for that is biprimes or discrete log, which are cryptography problems, something I'm interested in. But there's no use for that's obvious, at least, for doing some physical simulation or doing some search problem or like an actual useful use case. It's just something that the companies are dreaming up and making up and hoping that'll happen. But there's a whole community of quantum researchers out there that are saying this is BS. Scott Aronson, John Preskill.
There's
the
also another
top
side who
people in
says
the
it's not
field.
though. It's not. Like I get what you're saying with the RSA. I do want to reiterate, like IonQ is not trying to break the RSA. Like it's really trying to just these pharma firms are trying to partner up with them to
I know
create this
pharma.
practical path. To
I know
model
pharma really
catalysts.
well. I don't know how much you know about drug discovery, but
Martin, you gotta let other people talk about pharma. We know what you're saying, but he can bring it up.
But like the pharma spends $100 million a year on compute research. You want that market?
That's just a sub market. I'm not saying that's the end all be all. The primary market is AI, but
AI for quantum.
Yeah, well, Martin, can you break this down for us? Because what I read from the people on Shy's side is that working together with the current systems, it will reduce the energy. Why? What
so-
in late?
so my wife works.
Explain. I know. Explain
Yeah.
it like I'm not your wife,
Sure.
a quantum scientist.
No, that's fine.
I'm just like a knowledgeable person.
my
How
wife
would you explain this to someone like me? Why
my
is
wife-
that not the case?
Sure. My wife happens to work at this AI startup called OpenAI, and there's zero interest in quantum at this firm. Zero. I know 100 people that work there. Nobody's interested in quantum. They laugh at it. It's a complete joke. There's same thing at Google. Nobody's trying to use quantum for AI because the bandwidth, the information that I have to take from my computer to put into the quantum computer can store, at most right now, about enough information to encode your name. In according to our boy, whatever his name is, the IonQ CEO, Nicolo, according to our boy, in 5 years, it might be able to store enough for a photograph of this conversation. But nobody thinks these computers, only the people who are like literally lost, think that you can shove lots of information in these computers. You can't. You can't run a transformer. You can't run like some large compute. The NVIDIA NVM link puts 60 gigabits a second through the machine to spread out to the H100s, B100s. The quantum doesn't have that bandwidth. It is literally the skinniest straw you can imagine. And that's what it's designed to do. It's not designed to compete with NVIDIA. It's designed to literally calculate a really big prime number. There's no other application yet been found. Chris Monroe started IonQ. It's been taken over by shysters and hucksters and that's why Chris left. Chris is gone. Chris has quit IonQ. He's no affiliation. He's one of the world's greatest quantum scientists. He did a podcast with a unique, tiny physics podcast that's like 2,000 followers. And he said, it's going nowhere. We don't know how to do it. It's 30 years away.
Okay, Martin, you mentioned
started the
OpenAI. I know
company.
you can't get into specifics.
Now just to put a bow on it. Now there's a guy running the company that's doing an acquisition a day. He's promising revenue growth. The Rigetti CEO is the one honest guy in the space who's saying, don't believe any revenue growth from this. There's no revenue in quantum computing. This is a science project. And he's right. He said
The
you should.
Rigetti CEO said that there's no revenue.
Yes,
It's
he
because
said you should
the
not.
fidelity numbers slag and they're largely in the experimental platform phase. Like they're very different than IonQ. And again, like I don't appreciate you can communicate your bear thesis, but the amount of slander you've done throughout this debate is underappreciated, and it's really not. It's just really immature, to be honest. It's really hard for me to have an actual conversation with you in return to what you're saying. Is because
Listen, I'm
you're
pointing out
just going to be saying something louder. You're going to interrupt me, and you're just put slander on people who have a specific.
I'm sorry I hurt your feelings.
You didn't hurt
But
my
the
feelings.
reality
You're
is
not, you're
that-
not a
that's
person
not
I can have a
what he
conversation
said. That's
with.
not-
You're not a
alright.
person I can have a
It's going
conversation with. You're not. So
It's,
like,
it's, hard,
just,
it's hard when you're faced with hard-hitting facts. It's difficult.
dude, you've only
just
done
screaming
trust me,
shit
bro
up.
quotes. You have not
Martin,
done shit.
You're
Can I
making
ask
up
you-
fake things.
Okay, let's.
I'm using real terms. You don't know
Sure.
these terms. You're
Sure.
clueless.
I think you've been short a lot of these quantum names 70% ago. So like, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm going to make 100 million on this trade. When all this
You've been
fraud is-
very wrong. You've
when all
been
this
very
fraud
wrong.
is-
So
and I'm adding more capital. When this
you've been
fraud,
very wrong. You've been very wrong.
No, it's fine. I'm raising capital to put more money in this trade.
Sure.
And
Sure.
it's going to be awesome. When all the
Okay.
fraud is exposed,
Yeah.
the IonQ CEO,
Keep digging the hole you dug yourself in because you've
IonQ
been clearly
CEO
wrong.
the IonQ CEO realizes that his stock is so expensive. So what's he doing? Print stock to you. I'll print stock to you. I'll print stock to you. I'll print stock to anybody.
Sure.
I'll let you. I'll buy a Walmart with
Again,
with
more
this stock.
slander towards Nicola, which
It's
has
not
done
slander.
nothing.
He's literally
Yeah,
doing an
you've
acquisition
been-
every day.
You
What's
called him
slander?
a stick. So, oh, okay, sure.
What's
go for
slander?
it.
He's doing an acquisition every day.
Because
that
he's
normal?
building the quantum internet stack. That's how you
What
do
is
it.
that?
When you're,
You make that up.
oh
What
my
is
god!
the
When you're
quantum internet
when you're an
stack?
early disruptor
Alright.
in the secular growth thing, you
Martin, let
build.
him make his point, and we'll go back to you.
That's fake. There's no quantum internet. Can you connect to this quantum internet? Where is it?
Martin, I need you to explain this to me like I'm stupid. This is what I'm missing out on though, because you mentioned OpenAI. I don't know 100 people at OpenAI. I don't know one person at OpenAI. I have a friend who works at Anthropic. I did while you guys were going at it. I'm looking into OpenAI's efforts in quantum, and they made a pretty big. Who's Ben Bartlett? He's some Stanford researcher hired to explore quantum use cases at OpenAI. Why does this man exist at OpenAI if this is all
think it makes
bullshit?
sense to always look, but I think that confusing the looking with a business like AstraZeneca and Merck every 5 years they check into quantum because the quantum people beg them to.
But this guy's an expensive hire for look. And I guess what I'm saying is like I think I get what you're saying. You're bearish on it, but there's evidence that points to there is a curiosity here and something could be there. And similar to other nascent industries where the innovation curve is very long and slow, it seems like these companies are investing people and money into this. It can't be a scam. That's just my logical, like, explain to me how it's a scam.
I think it is. I think that the quantum companies are tricking Fortune 500s into looking into their technology. When they look into their technology, just as I have, I've spent a lot of my own money on quantum computing.
But what's OpenAI's reason to hire this guy?
Well, I don't know what that guy does day to day or not, but the core team at OpenAI doesn't think quantum computing is in their future. They think nuclear fusion.
So it says he's a researcher at OpenAI. He's working on a project that would accelerate AI training on huge GPU clusters.
Yes.
So
GPU clusters.
But this is what I'm saying. Like what I've heard from the other side is it's not a replacement.
Yeah, it can't do
working together. So he's exploring how they work together, I assume.
I don't think quantum can help anyone other than a code breaker.
Okay, but I guess I'm missing something. Why?
It's because he's not saying anything. He's not saying.
I think one of the things
he's just flying
a lot of people listen. I've challenged you many times to name one algorithm that will work.
Dude, it doesn't matter what I'm saying. You're just saying the same
No,
vague
I want to know
BS.
what your point is.
I'm checked out, dude. I'm checked out. There's no point.
You don't know anything about quantum computing.
It's not. There's no point in me
Do
communicating
they
my
pay
energy.
you, by the way? Do they pay you? Does IonQ pay you?
No, not at all.
Well, why? Why are you bullish? What's the upside?
I've been bullish probably by when you were behind bars. That's how long I've been bullish.
I've been in quantum
IonQ.
computing since I was a kid.
No, but I've been in bullish on IonQ for a while. So like
Since the SPAC they needed to do because no one would invest in them.
No, you can see my cost base. It's under $10, but
No, since the SPAC, they failed as a private company. They had to SPAC.
I disagree. It's a $10 billion company. Are you saying
now it is? Now it is, thanks to the crazy bull market we're in.
No, it's thanks to people like who are shorting the stock who are clearly wrong.
I have nothing to do. This is nothing.
Why are you picking the battle against being hyper bearish on quantum when you're just
nothing there?
You've been wrong for
you've
been clearly so wrong.
One great sign of fraud: the IonQ guy can't explain how much organic revenue he's going to have and how much inorganic revenue he's going to have this year.
That's so.
Nobody will.
That's not a big rock for him. Why would he care about that little deciphering? A lot of bigger companies don't decipher that way.
No. He says revenue's growing, right? He says revenue's doubling every year. Okay, how much of that is from acquisitions?
It doesn't matter when you're this early in this theme that's just getting started. It's infantry.
Well, if you're saying the demand is growing and the customers are there and the farm is paying, like you said, then how much are they paying versus how much are you buying this new revenue? I think that's a basic question to ask. In fact, I've never seen a company not disclose how much revenue an acquiree has.
Let me just ask you a quick question. It's not provoking. It's just like when you're trying to transition from hardware to an ecosystem or a network play, how do you do that pivot? Do you do it organically? You have to do it via acquisition.
And that's fine. But I think all you have to do is explain our core quantum business is not growing. It's not showing any promise. We have to grow. We have to buy this other stuff, like a space constellation that has nothing to do with quantum.
I do think Niccolo sees that the quantum hardware game is one that's going to be a dud.
Yes.
That's why I think a lot of the
quantum computing is a dud.
No, the hardware, hardware play is a dud. No, but I think it's going to be much more like a GPU space where, like, if you're just a GPU provider, hardware company, you're kind of a dud in this reality.
NVIDIA?
No, Nvidia's not a hardware company. Do you
Yeah,
think Nvidia's a hardware
makes
company?
makes the box. I can show you one of them. I mean,
No, do you think it's a hardware company?
Nvidia is a hardware company. They literally
Okay, then
make
you
the
lost me.
machine that you buy.
You lost me because they're absolutely not. They're not a hardware company. Not even
Nvidia makes a
close.
box.
You
like a
don't know
physical
AI. You
box
actually
that
don't.
process-
You sealed my argument. They're not a hardware company at all. Their CUDA and their NVLink, everything they do is a full-on ecosystem.
So why don't you go ahead and make an H100 if it's so easy?
I never said it's easy. I just said you can't
They're
be
a
a
hardware
publicly traded
company.
company that's purely
It's
on
the
a hardware
definition of a
angle.
hardware company.
It's not. Do you think Apple's a hardware company?
They partially make hardware, yeah.
You're saying the same.
Parsley.
You
You
guys are
added
saying the
parsley.
same thing. You guys are saying the same thing.
This is
Exactly, but it's
hardware.
provoking me for no
Hard-
reason. I don't
You guys are
understand it.
saying the same thing.
Hardware is
Martin-
different from software.
Martin,
This
when
is something like hardware because you can hold it and touch it. That's the difference between
you
hardware
guys
and
are
software.
making a similar. All Shy's saying is they're not only a hard. Obviously, no one's saying that Nvidia doesn't make hardware.
There's no charge
So-
to use CUDA. It's not a revenue generator. Let's be clear. It's just how you use the computer. It is software. Every hardware needs instruction set software.
CUDA is what keeps people paying up for the hardware.
It's also the best hardware. It's
Sure, but a lot.
You guys are
the
saying the same
alternatives-
thing.
Yeah, I know. There's no point.
part
Okay.
of hardware is you develop a
The
software.
bell
instruction set.
opened up. The market has opened up 2 minutes ago.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, lovely.
Oh shit! I had something I was gonna ask you, Martin. I just lost it and I got distracted. Okay. I want to go back quickly to and I don't want to like center on like IonQ, but just in general for people listening. You're kind of hating on inorganic growth versus organic. Isn't that just a viable way to grow if you're buying up products and offerings that fulfill the vision that you have? Like what's innately bad about that in this industry?
Nothing. I built a
So-
gigantic drug company buying companies, but
So what's the rub?
But the thing is, when you buy other companies, you generally are acknowledging, especially if you don't disclose what your former business was versus your current, you're generally doing it because you're not growing by yourself.
I
you
mean, is that always Microsoft buys company? All these big
No,
companies,
no, but
they all grow by buying bigger companies.
You usually show, okay, my old business did this much, my new business is doing this much, and smart analysts look at it and say, okay, well, let me subtract one of these from the other, and what is the old core business doing? Is it growing? Because they're telling me it's growing. They're telling me that.
about
But
M&A
I guess
though,
as
not
far- yeah,
acquisitions,
but
not
I'm
small
an M&A expert.
acquisitions.
I've actually done M&A. You
Yeah,
haven't.
Martin,
done-
if
I've
the
actually
core-
I've done a lot of M&A deals.
what
talk
publicly
about
traded companies have you bought?
it. Have I bought?
Yeah,
Nothing, but I've
what
worked in the back
publicly-
end of Fortune 500 companies making acquisitions.
Okay, so you haven't, as a CEO, bought another company.
No, I have not as a CEO done that before
Okay.
going to prison.
wanna-
If that's what you're asking.
Okay, guys,
As
let's like
somebody
step
that's
back a
actually
bit.
done something in business, what I can tell you is that you need to see, as an investor, the investors want to know what happened to your old business. Is it
So
still
when you're a
growing?
$10 billion company, you acquire a company for 150 million.
is
They
fine.
want
But
they want to see that difference.
It's
BS.
fine. All you have to
It's
do
BS.
is say,
it's BS. It's
yeah,
BS.
all you have to do is say, you know
Well,
what?
Martin,
Our old business isn't growing anymore. The new business is going to make it look
Isn't-
like our company is growing.
Isn't that like a foregone conclusion that you're buying to grow if your core business isn't
you're
growing?
always
Is that
buying
like
to
is that a
grow.
big secret though? Like is
No,
that like
no,
obviously, right?
They're not telling anybody. I've never seen anything like this, Katie. Every time you do M&A, you say the company we're buying for all this money, huge amounts of money, this
not
is their
huge.
financial profile. Like they bought a company for $1 billion today.
Today,
much-
yes, today. It's a big
How
one.
much
And give them-
revenue does that company have?
Give them a chance to communicate that.
How
It
much
happened
revenue does
hours
that
ago.
company
It
have?
just happened a couple hours
No,
ago.
they've
but I'm
done
saying
Shai,
other
what was
acquisitions.
Shai, what was the acquisition today?
Usually you
just-
put in the press release. They're,
You
they're
don't use not.
no, of course you do. You say the company had this much revenue, and it's
You're talking
accretive
about
or
like a
dilutive.
Salesforce acquiring these like billions of dollar
No,
companies.
they
Yes.
say it's accretive, dilutive, or immaterial. So how much revenue? They said they're going to do 50 to 70 in revenue. How much of the revenue is coming from the original quantum computing business? They will not answer that.
But why does it matter, I guess?
Yeah.
Because Katie, it's so important because it violates the narrative that quantum computing is growing. It's not
But
growing.
aren't these quantum adjacent businesses? They're buying like unrelated things.
If you smush together 10 things that are not growing, you're not growing organically. You're growing inorganically, which Wall Street hates.
All right, so Salesforce for the past 15 years.
They have some organic growth, and then they have inorganic.
Some,
you-
but like, you're picking holes in it. Like
No. If you
Salesforce
had,
is-
that's Wall Street wants to see that you have organic growth despite acquisitions.
so Palo Alto acquires their cybersecurity platform. Are you saying they're just a dud?
No, it's okay and great to do acquisitions. What's not okay is to not disclose how much benefit you're getting from the acquisition versus your old business, which
Why
every
isn't-
company does.
Why isn't
Palo
that
Alto,
required?
everyone does this.
Why isn't that a required disclosure if it's so important? Why isn't the government require people to disclose that?
It sort of is, which again is why I'm using some of the words that I'm using. And I think that
It
it's
is sort of.
really-
Is it sort of? I mean, you can't have a sort of rule.
No,
It's
there's a lot of
It's not.
interpretation on some of these things, as I've learned. You know, you should disclose how much revenue you are getting from a business you're buying. You really
You
should,
should,
do
but
that.
you don't have to.
That is up to securities lawyers and the SEC. I've learned not to test their patience.
Okay, interesting. Martin, do you want to hang for a little bit more? Or you?
Yeah, I got all day.
All right.
I just don't like quitters that don't want to actually get into the
Hey,
discussion.
I think this was such a good conversation when we were keeping it at the level of content and not personal. Let's just,
It's not personal. I don't know this guy.
yeah.
Bro,
he's-
you're
he's not a
slandering
quitter.
so
He's
many
not a
people you don't
quitter.
even know.
It's okay.
Yeah, you
It's
calling me a
okay.
quitter? What are you talking
You are
about?
quitting every time I try to get involved with this conversation. You say, I can't.
Because I know people like you, and it's gonna take a lot of exhaustion, mental capital, just to even entertain.
You
10
just
minutes
have
with
to
you.
provide one interesting intellectual point.
That's what I say. You added intellectual point. You're calling me a fucking idiot.
Yes,
You don't know how to handle yourself, and I'm checked out of you. Like I don't want to interact. I
you're
kind of
quitting.
want.
I get it. You checked out. You're quitting. I got it.
Okay,
It's
sure.
supposed to be debate, but you quit.
sure. Okay.
That's
Go for it.
All right, Martin, we got for a couple more minutes. Can I ask you some rapid fire questions while
Sure.
we're cooling off, getting ready for the who do you think punched Elon Musk?
Oh, I don't know, or I don't know.
That
That
you
one
not-
you don't know. You make an
you
assumption.
not
That's what
know?
I'm saying. You just go for hot takes on.
How do I know?
Oh my
I don't
God.
know. I don't know who
Come
punched Elon Musk.
on.
well, they're saying it
Jeez.
was Basent. They're saying it was Basent. I don't
I think that article said it happened in April, so the percent push and
That's
shove.
quite- that would've
Maybe
been
it happened again. I don't care. I don't know. I
Someone
still
hit
don't
him.
care.
It wasn't a kid. That's just my opinion. That's not investment advice. On this fallout though, and I know you don't want to get too deep into this, but like it's this Trump Elon fallout. Is there a trade there? Do you think there's a trade there? Are you doing anything on this?
Nah, I mean, I don't care. I think that every time a rich person goes to Washington, they realize it's a cluster, and they get out, and 1% of them kind of stay in and say, I can deal with this cluster, but 99% of hedge fund guys I know that are really top corporate guys that go to Washington, just basically say, I don't want any part of this 6 months
Yeah.
later.
And you have a bit of a history with Elon Musk, but I'm not quite sure of where you fall on like Tesla, bull bear. But like you have analysts coming out and saying, okay, this is a real risk now. People are talking about potentially selling on this. You don't think there's anything there? You think this is all going to blow over?
It's hard to say, it's a very closely looked at stock. I admire Elon a huge amount. He was very kind to unban me off Twitter. I feel like
Why were you banned in the first place?
I got into a fight with a journalist, a woman journalist. I don't know if that.
Oh, right. Okay, I remember now.
Well, I'm
Not
not-
not surprising.
But he banned you.
no. The old Twitter guard did.
Okay, then he brought you back.
Well, I get into quote unquote fights because I am willing to go to the mat on my investments, go to the mat on my ideas that I have high conviction is. As you can see, I don't know anything about Elon and Tesla. What do I know? But I know a hell of a lot about quantum. And I know that this space is a great short.
All right. Martin, thank you so much for stopping by today.
Sure.
I hope you had as much fun as we did.
Definitely.
And we'll see you on X and all the places. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, let's check in with what's going on in the market today. That was interesting and exciting. Shy, you have any thoughts after that? Or you just want to move on?
little man who
I-
can't let me even respond, but says I'm a quitter. I'm an idiot. Can't says Nick. All these CEOs don't know what they're talking about. What people he talks at Google think it's just gonna be max 100 million, where they're spending more.